does. Get fired up, get doing stuff. Anutsomaya I nota toscatama anuma. But I want to on the sounds of the language today. Yeah. Thought we'd take a look at that. Take things all the way back to square one. Square one, sounds of the language. And we'll give the stream 30 seconds to warm up. I usually share this on my Facebook page. There it is right there. Always shows up right at the top. Try and get a few people in, but we'll get fired up. We'll give this 2 minutes and then we'll fire up anyway. Dansukakyo, Aya, Mio Tipskansik. Pag-usemon ne Mio Tipskansik. Anutsaya. We're going to start right at the very beginning. We're going to rewind. We've been working on some intermediate grammar stuff for a while, but I thought tonight, just based on a couple of conversations I'd had recently, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning and talk about sounds of the language. Mananto, Nikki. Mia sine tago sinian tapwe. It's good that you've arrived. So we'll get... And if you're not familiar with, there's this PDF out there called How to Spell It in Cree. I think you can actually find this on, there's a link right here from Arden's site. And this is the one here about SRO, a little bit about why we use it and how to use it. And which will cover basically the same thing, but this is another great resource from Ginoki Masis and Eric Wolvengray, of course. But I thought we'd poke at this book tonight a little bit. Actually, the workbook, Cree Language of the Plains. But there's free versions of this on online. You can find them on my website if you go to kiano.net to the Learner Library and then search for Cree Language of the Plains, and you can find that there. And these ones are free online. The Language of the Plains workbook, the audio sessions. I put the link here because there's a couple of them out there, and one of them doesn't have all of the audio. And then the Language of the Plains PDF. So yeah, let's tie into it. We'll just do this in my... We'll do this way tonight. So I'm not going to read through this necessarily. I just wanted to find some of the examples that they use in the book and just tie right into sounds, pronunciation. I guess we could talk about minimal pairs a little bit. And maybe also, yeah, possession. What I wanted to do was talk about sounds and pronunciation, and then I wanted to jump into some gotchas, like some common sounds or common groups of sounds in the language. There are sometimes when you hit clusters of vowel, consonant, vowel pairs or something, and they'll have a specific sound. They will sound a specific way, and they can be very regional also. And that's just with language. But we'll start at the very beginning here. We'll start right at the top. There are 4 to 7 vowel sounds in the language in Nehiyuwin. And the thing that we have to keep in mind is that if we try and read these with an English voice, then we're not going to be making the correct sounds of Nehiyuwin, okay, because they're different. That took me a long time to like figure that out. But once I realized, that was a major kind of leap for me in my language, when I realized that the sounds, there are so many sounds in this language that do not exist in English, right? And not all of the English sounds overlap. And that just sort of opened my eyes to like, oh, okay, that's how I, this is how we advance, is understanding these sound systems are different. The sounds of the language are different. And so we use letters that look like English letters, but we have our own alphabet for Nehiyowin. We call it SRO, the Standard Roman Orthography, or some people call it the Standard Cree alphabet. But they have their own sounds. So we'll run through them. There's seven vowel sounds, the short vowels, and then the long vowels. So for the short vowels, there's the short A. The short vowel sounds don't have any they're called a diacritic. So when you take that letter, like, and you put a mark over the top, sometimes you'll see like a little hat, and sometimes you'll see like a bar. Those are the same. The fancy term for those is called a diacritic. Doesn't really matter. You don't need to know that. Hey, Tancy Relic. Oh yeah, I forgot to share on that one. Yeah, thanks for sharing that out there, Bill. So those are called diacritics, but these are long vowels here. These ones, and we'll get to those in a second. These are the same. It's just a regional preference. We see this in some things, and we see this in others. Doesn't matter. Don't worry that they're different. It just marks that it's a long vowel. Okay. So the short A is going to make an sound. And in English, an equivalent, if you want to think of it that way, like a relatively equivalent sound might be like the in but. Okay, so upseas. Okay. Whoops. Mama Scots. Ma. Okay, that's an sound. Kia. And that's a short A. Okay. I have to keep looking at 4 different screens here to make sure I don't have any comments. The short I sound is going to be most like English, like I, like as in fit or bit or something like that. Isco, deo. So that one's pretty intuitive. It's pretty much, it's going to sound mostly like you expect. But there will be some cases, along with these being short vowels, I call them weak vowels. That's just something I made up. It's not really a thing. But I call them weak because they can disappear sometimes, especially the short I and sometimes the short A. They can just kind of get smushed into the word. And so I call them like a weak vowel because they don't always stick around. It's super common. I think it was like Chelsea Vowell, or I don't know who I'm quoting here, like the eyes drop like flies kind of thing. And there's a good example of that in this word here, which in some areas you will hear pronounced as danese, but in lots of areas you hear danse, right? You don't hear that I in the middle always. Sometimes, depends where you go, and it's a little bit different everywhere. Danse or danese, okay? But we spell it with all of the pieces on purpose. There's a reason all of the bits are in there. There's a reason that we don't omit them. Because we want to keep all of the meaning in the word. It's important to realize that we don't read based on the sounds of the letters. We read based on the shapes of the words. And by the time you started to read English, you were already pretty much fluent as a kid in English, right? So you were just associating the shape of the word, the shape of that word you're reading, with the word you already knew. So we have to try and mimic that process when we're learning Nehiyowin. That being said, the Nehiyaw spelling system is much more helpful, in my opinion, than the English one, because it's much more consistent. And we'll get to that in a bit. So, tane se, iskoteo, tane se, tige, I. That's that short I sound, I. That O sound, the short O sound, this is close to something like the sound in shook or book. O, O. So, ogimakan. Oh, sorry, ogimakan. Oh. If you just make this sound when you're making that O, pretty much it's super close. And again, it's one of those things where there can be like a little bit of variation depending on where you go. If you go, more northern, southern, a little bit more in Saskatchewan, this can fluctuate a little bit. So what's really important is the way it's said where you are, like your community or the region that you're in. But if you make this sound, oh, like book, you'll be pretty close most of the time. Most of the time. Oh. Aya, egose, ne wo, oh. So that's the three short vowels. The three short vowels. Ah, apsis, mama, scats, kia, isko, deo, dane, se, tige, ogimakan, egse. Remember I called that a weak vowel. Sometimes you don't hear that, egse, right? You don't always hear that, because it's more common with I, ne, wo. All right, so let's jump over to the long vowels now. Okay, these are the ones, and again, you'll see these two different ways. Sometimes you'll see them more commonly where I'm at, or like more Western. You'll see it with the little hat. They call that a circumflex. Doesn't matter what it's called. This one, and they call this one a macron. Doesn't matter. Either mark will do. You'll see both. Yeah, you'll see both. So these ones, some of these have sounds that are fairly similar to, if you want to sort of memorize based on the English counterpart, you can. This one is like ah, but it can vary also. So where I learned the Treaty 6 Edmonton area, this is like the ah in father. Ah, father, ah. But in some areas, it's closer to an ah, like hat, if you go a little more eastern. Okay, again, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that if you get it close, then that's kind of what's important. There's only like 17 of these, so they're not too tough. Zimun. The other thing I should say about the long vowels compared to the short vowels, and again, this is just the way I hear things, compared to, like, this is the way I hear things in the area where I learn mostly. The long vowels are, you pronounce them generally speaking for like a longer period of time. It's very subtle sometimes, but like the difference between long A and short A is like ah, like you say it a little bit longer. Again, it's not always like that, but if you really pay attention, like it's like a pattern in the language. Zimun, maga. See how that is like that? That's a perfect example of that. Maga. This one's short and abrupt, and this one is sort of long and drawn out a little bit, if that makes sense, right? Nuhtawi, which, hilarious, it's father. Okay, so that's the long A. Long I sound is probably closest to, like, it makes an E sound in Nehioiwen, okay? So the E like feet. Okay, it's going to make that E sound. So this is going to be Nipin, Seep, CP, E. Okay. The long O sound, remember the short O sound makes a like shook. This one's going to make an oo like moose, which, funny enough, comes from the Cree language. Moose. Uhu. Ucheo. Suniao. And the shape or the sound of this letter, just like the short O, is going to be influenced a little bit by the letters around it. And that's just a function of how the muscles work in your mouth when you're making those sounds. You don't need to worry about that too much. If you just aim to be close, you'll have a good head start. The long E makes a sound like A, as in like hey, A, eogo. This is one of those weak vowel moments here. We'll talk about W in a minute a little bit more and come up with some more examples where the W in Nihiuiwan is less like a consonant and more like a vowel. We'll talk about that more in a second, but ewago. I never hear it quite that way, ewago. I hear eogo, eogo. Me guats, te pue. So that's that A sound, A. So that's there's 3 short and the 4 long vowels. All right, let's talk about consonant sounds now. When I learned these, and the sounds that you make with these, again, depending where you go, these can be different. The T and the P sound in Nihiuiwan can be a little bit challenging, and also the K sound, because again, remember, these are not English sounds, okay? If you're trying to read these words with an English voice, it's not going to sound right. And if we're speaking and we're trying to be understood, which is our goal with, like, that's why we communicate, right? We want to be understood. We want people to understand us. Then we want to work on pronouncing as accurately as possible, but also understand that the reason that there's a challenge pronouncing some of these is if you didn't grow up hearing the language, right? If you're coming from a background like myself where you only spoke English or maybe some French or something, these sounds are different. So we're going to have to practice those muscles in our mouth to make these sounds, right? We don't have that muscle memory yet, hey, to make the sounds of the language. But if you grew up in community or on reserve and you have that so-called res accent, right? You already have the sounds of your language you already have those sounds. You grew up with that gift, with the beautiful sounds of your language, right? We joke about res accent or something like that, but that's actually because the sounds of Nihiuiwan are already in your voice. Bisim is the sun, or it can be an orb in the sky, Bisim. By the way, you can go find this PDF online. This is the book. We're kind of going through this Cree language of the plains here. You don't have to buy the book. You can find it. You can go to my site, kiano.net, to the Learner Library and search for Language of the Plains, or you can Google it. You'll find these PDFs online. But I have the PDFs, Cree Language of the Plains, the workbook, the audio sessions from Jinoki Maasis that come with the workbook, and the PDF. The links are all right there in one spot, so they're nice and easy to find. Yeah, so that's the book where we're just working through the sounds of the language right now. So this sound, bisim, sometimes you'll hear people say, well, it's kind of halfway between like a P and a B maybe, and that's kind of true. But the way Reuben Quinn taught this sound to us was if you put your lips together and then before you let the breath, the word out with your breath, you use a firm pressure with your lips. Bisim, pa, pa, pa. That's that sound that makes pa, bisim. Right? It's not an English sound. It's its own thing. Bisim. Right? Pakan. De pakop. Right? This one's going to be voiced and this one's not, so they're going to sound, but they're very, again, the concept is very similar. It's its own sound. Same with the T sound. I was watching a video of somebody who was pretty familiar with the language. Might have even been a fluent speaker. I don't actually know them. But I saw them pronounce a word on TikTok just recently, and you could see very clearly when we say this sound in English for this T, okay, you put your teeth together, and then you just lightly touch your tongue to the back of your teeth. T, T, T. Actually, yeah, T. But when you say it in Aganihuian, you again apply firm pressure with your tongue. before you let that air out of your mouth. So it's going to be ta, 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 ta. Again, I've heard sometimes people say, it's somewhere in between an English T and an English D, maybe, but it's its own sound. Ta, 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 to wow, tu sa pui, tan ta to, or tani ta to, ta, ta, ta. It's its own sound. And it was Ruben that said, these are the sounds that a baby will start to make when that soft spot in the top of their head begins to close. A little one will start making these sounds. Hey, so these are the sounds. You've already had these sounds in your voice. This one might have I don't want to say the most variation, but there's a fair bit of variation in this because it is voiced and unvoiced as well. So if it's in the middle of a word, it'll often sound a little bit different than if it's on the end of the word. Again, I've heard this is sometimes somewhere between an English K and a G. But again, it really depends on where you go, which community you're in. Like this, if we hear that word kokum, kokum. But there are communities where I hear that word gokum, like it sounds much more voiced. And that's the difference between those. A K and a G are effectively pretty close to the same sound in your mouth, but one is a little more voiced than the other, I think. Anyway, this is going to sound like ka, 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 gu, goose, gi, spin. See, this sounded more K-ish and this sounded more G-ish to me. I never even realized that. Gu, goose. I don't say ki spin, I say gi spin. That's how I hear that word. Gi spin. Segag. Segag. But it's going to really depend on the area that you're in, the region that you're in, can sound a little bit different. So if you want to sound accurate, I will say, make sure you're listening to fluent speakers or recordings or, from your community or from your region. This one, depending where you go, this can make a couple of different sounds, but it's most closest to or where I learned anyway, it'll be either like a TS as in like cats, okay? So t, 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 something like that, cats. Or it'll be like the CH in like church. So if you go to like and that's more in the Treaty 6 Edmonton, that's more like Musqueam is a little bit more like this. But if you go a little more further north, it's a little bit more like this. So I'll say this, Jesqua, 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 Tsige, Tsige, Anuch. But some people will say Anuch. I think even maybe out further east too. Again, depending where you are, the sounds will be a little bit different everywhere, but we still spell it the same way. Because just because the sound changes, the meaning doesn't change. The meaning is the same. So we use one letter consistently for that. Okay. And the reason we have our own alphabet, let me just zip through here, is that if we use English sounds to try, we run into this problem where, just to make the sound E in English, has all of these different ways that you can make that sound. Me, seed, cedar, seas, amoeba, people. These are all different. Key, trio, lady, right? There's all these different ways. So we end up in these scenarios where you try to spell a word using English sounds, and we have, even though this is the same word, this is only a small sampling of different spellings for this word, kesagitin, that I took from Facebook, right? It's important we have consistent spelling so that when you look at a word, you know what it is, right? Can you imagine if you were reading Harry Potter and you got to the second chapter and the author changed their mind about how they wanted to spell things, or you went to another book and it was spelled differently again, everything you read used a different spelling system. That would be very frustrating, right? You'd probably want to throw the book out. All right. Let's keep going here. 3D6. Suniwachi Waskaigan and Sigatik, Rocky Mountain House is where I grew up, which is in southwestern Alberta. Yeah, but I spent a lot of time in Edmonton. That's where I picked up most of the language. But I have mentors from everywhere. S sounds pretty much like you would expect. S, se mak, sisone. Aniguatas. Aniguatas. M and N are going to sound, again, pretty similar to English. Mitso. Namoya. Tim. I'm going to talk about W on this one. N, again, is super close. Na peo. Na peo. Nicole says, Treaty 9, I am Treaty 9, Nishnabemon, Miasin. Miasinanma. Tancy Brandon. Let me know how the stream is on Twitch. Sometimes it cuts in and out. Na peo. Niso. Ne miss. I want to talk about this for a minute because this is a good example. I just mentioned a minute ago that the W sound in Nihiuiwan is more like a vowel than it is a consonant. And that's why you have two sounds here. Okay, because this W is, they use that because it's a rounding of the lips. So it's more like a kind of an O. Na peo. Right? It's making its own sound there. And understanding that is important because it'll start to make sense when you run into words where you have like Musqua, where there's that W there. But then when you diminutize it, or anything that has to do with this root, okay, that W turns to an O. That's because they're kind of not really different. They're kind of the same thing. Musqua, muscosis, if you think about it that way. H is its own thing. Oh yeah, we could have talked about W down here, but that's fine. We'll come back to it. H is its own thing. This is something we don't really have in English. H is an aspiration. And what that means is that you do like a puff of air when you run into that. And so I still sometimes exaggerate that puff of air because it's not something that we do naturally. And in the younger generation of speakers, you don't hear this as much, but if you listen closely to the older generation of speakers, you hear it pretty consistently. So, and the thing that H does to short vowels is it lengthens them slightly, right? So this I starts to slide more towards an E sound, somewhere kind of in the middle. But again, it's regional a little bit, hey? Like you just kind of need to listen and listen and listen. And then you start to understand, how it sounds where you're at, where you're from. So I hear this sometimes, apito, but if you listen to those older speakers, or when I listen to the older speakers, I hear apito, apito. There's a little breath in there, right? Uhe, uhe. This can sound like, again, this short I, I call it a weak vowel. You go a little further east and they'll typically pronounce this uhu. But also I hear this with speakers when there's another vowel in this position in the next word, it can strongly influence that vowel on the end. Uhe. Osi. This one's tricky because there are commands that have H on the end. And so, again, depending on who's saying it, the older speakers I work with, I hear it very clearly. But those, sometimes you don't hear those very often. So it's just one of those things you almost have to kind of listen for, if that makes sense. All right, that W. Again, this is, to me, when I think about this, I don't think of it as like a W in English. I think of it as kind of its own like O sound. It's got its own sound. It sounds more like an O. If you think about this as an O and you just pronounce those, not in an English way, but you pronounce those independently, wapos, 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 right? You're rounding your lips to make that sound, but we just write it this way. This one here, because there's a short A, the way I hear this, because this is a weak, what I call a weak vowel, the rounding of the lips or that W sound will sort of like override that A sound, and I'll hear nanto, nanto. But in some areas, you'll also hear nantao, ah, oh. You'll hear ah, oh, right? There's those two sounds there, depending on where you go. I almost never hear this I in the middle though. Nanto, I never hear that. I always hear nanto. Not like tanse. I hear tanese sometimes, but I've never heard nanito. That would sound funny actually if I heard it. I'd be like, what? What is nanito? This one, wahyo. But sometimes I just hear wayo. I don't always hear the H on this one, but wahyo, I hear that sometimes. I think I still actually just struggle to pronounce this word correctly most of the time. The Y, again, the Y sound is just, it's almost like the sound between two vowels, if that makes sense. And sometimes, yeah, and actually that does make sense, because sometimes in place of a Y, I will actually hear that W sound. I don't know if the right word for that is like a glide or whatever. I don't know what the right word is for that, but there are cases where in the place of where there is a Y or you would normally hear a Y, I will hear a W and the same with that O sound. Oya gun, and the way I hear this is we are gun, which is a little bit different variation. Oya gun. Yi go one. Yi go one. This is one of those cases where that the Y sound will elongate that I. They should actually spell this with a long I, but we won't get into that. But this is niya. Niya. That's it. We've gone through all 17 of those. So we'll just do a quick recap in case you missed it. Short vowels first. Ah, apsis, mama scats, kia, isko, teo, tanese, tige, okimakan, ego se, neo. Timuin, maga. That's a perfect example of the difference, long and short vowel. That word right there. Maga. Nuhtawi. Nipin. Sisip. Sipi. Long O. Sound like moose. Ooh-hoo. Again, that W is elongating the sound of that short O because that W has its own sound. Tapskuts, umaya, umamuta, ucheu. That O on the end is because of that W. Ucheu, ucheu. Suniao. Like hey. Eo go. Me guats. Te pue. Consonant sounds. Pa, pa, pa. Pisim. Pakan. Te pagop. Ta. Tawao. Tu sa pue. tanta to, ka, kus, ki spin, segag, tsa or cha, tsesqua, tsige, anuts. Semag, sisone, anigutsas, mitso, namoya, atem, napeo, niso, nemis, apito, ohe, osi, wapus, nanto, wahyo, ya, uyagan, yigoan, niya. Yeah, and what's cool about those is all of those sounds are derived, because they're derived from the language, they're also derived from the syllabics. Shemag in Nish. Yeah, neat. So if you know you're a Takpeganak, then you can go back and forth between the Nehio, the SRO, and the Takpeganak, and they're Peguan. They're going to be the same, hey? Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. No questions about that, eh? Pretty straightforward. Seems pretty straightforward. Okay, let's go a little further here. All right. I guess minimal pairs. Just to recap, if you're just joining in, we're just going through this. We're mostly focused on sounds of the language right now this evening. Jaina has a question. How often you go live? On Wednesdays, I do study. Like we're doing right now. Sometimes grammar, sometimes just whatever. It's open. So if you have questions, we can kind of bounce around, and kind of like an office hours. So this is open for you as learners. If you have a question, don't be scared to drop it in the comments. If you do drop it in the comments and I miss it, give me a minute to catch up. I'm monitoring multiple things, but I will get to it. But Wednesdays and then Sundays we do transcribing. Sunday nights at the same time. Wednesdays at 6 Pacific and Sundays at 6 Pacific. Yeah. So twice a week. And we do a study group with Bill Relic on Mondays as well. And I have another friend that's doing Michif transcription on Saturdays, but we don't live broadcast those. Those are just groups that are going on. Okay, let's keep going here. But you could find these books, Cree Language of the Plains. If you go to my site, kiano.net, you can find them in the Learner Library, or you can just Google for it. Cree Language of the Plains. You can find these free online as a PDF, and there's audio files that go with them. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's talk about some things that are interesting. We'll talk about some of these. They call these minimal pairs. These are words that sound similar, but they're actually different. And just to talk about that, but then we'll also talk about clusters. And I don't know if that's in this book, but we'll find some examples, and we'll talk about clusters that sort of, maybe you could say they have their own rules a little bit about, right? They have, actually, we'll just get into it because there's a good example right here. There's two examples. In this one, this word, they're demonstrating the difference between that long A and the short A. But the other thing that's interesting about this is this cluster, the vowel consonant vowel cluster in the middle, AHI, which depending on where you are can have a different sound. Okay, so the way I would pronounce this word, sagaigan, So this cluster here will make the sounds kind of like I. You don't really hear that H in there. However, if I'm chatting with somebody who's from more northern Alberta, I'm trying to think of a specific. I can think of a specific person, but I don't remember what community they're from. North of Edmonton, some speakers will pronounce this more clearly. Sagahigan. I hear that way as well. Masanahikan. Whereas I generally hear Masanaigan, Masanahikan. Both of those would be correct. Again, because it's just a little bit regional, right? And then this one over here is going to be the same, but that's that short A. Sagahigan. Sagaigan, 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 Sagaigan. So that's that sa and sa. Different, eh? This word I hear a lot. This word I don't hear very much. Yeah. No mystery to these. Again, that IY is going to make an E sound. Nia. This is going to be nia, nan, or that. I call this a weak vowel because sometimes it'll disappear, and I'll just hear ninan, or nianan. But this one, the long vowel and the short vowel are swapped on this one. Nianan. Nianan. We should also mention too, often when if we go back a little bit, there's this thing that happens when you have, let's break down this word a little bit, because another thing that happens with beginners when we're learning to speak, if we don't understand, I used to call this the stress, but I believe the correct word is the pitch accent. Pitch accent? I think that's the right word. But let's break this down into the length of the word based on syllables, okay? And what's cool about the syllables is with the exception of W, the consonant vowel pairs in SRO, we'll pick on this one, Nanto, the consonant vowel pairs in SRO will correspond with the syllabics. Let me fix that. I want to make that a little bit thinner for that one. Maybe there. So there's one there, there's one there, there's one there. So there's 3 full syllabics, and then this would be what's called a final. So if we write this out in syllabics, let me get my syllabic brain on for a second. So na is going to go that way. Na is going to be this way. Na. Dot over top for na. So that's going to be na. Ne is going to be, oh, did I get this wrong already? Jiskwa. I'm just doing this live on the fly, so I'm like, me, ki. So ne is going to be this way. Yeah, had to think about that for a second. Ne, which is going to be short. Ta is going to be this. And then that O on the end is going to be like that. So this is going to be ne, ta, and that's that W final. Nanto. So we can see here that there's 1, 2, 3 syllables, 1, 2, 3, and then the final on the end, okay? If I made a mistake there, let me know, because I'm like, on the fly, I'm like, wait a minute, I suddenly forgot all my syllabics. Pretty sure that's right. The point being that there's 3. And those syllabics, each of those syllabics, those, what Ruben would call those, the major spear marker, main spear markers? Yeah, major, I forget what he calls those. Each of them corresponds with a consonant vowel pair in SRO. Okay. The reason I'm talking about this is because if we break up a word at the vowel consonant boundary, okay, and then we count 1, 2, 3. Okay, we drop the final. We still need to pronounce it, but we're just doing this for the purposes of understanding the pitch accent, which can help to inform us how to pronounce something correctly. It also helps a lot when you're transcribing, because if you don't know a word and you're listening and you can hear maybe the ending and you can hear where the pitch accent is, that can help a lot of times. when you're like, oh, I think I know what this is, just based on where the what I would have called the stress, but the pitch accent, based on where that's at. That can really help. So what usually happens, it's not really a rule, it's more like a guideline, my best Barbosa voice, okay? What usually happens is the pitch accent is on the third last syllable. It is on the third last syllable in the way we pronounce it almost always, but not necessarily the way that we spell it, because again, some of these weak vowels can disappear. In this particular case, and here's a good example. I'll break this down. So I'm gonna outline the I'll outline it in blue. So the na is the third last. So this is going to be the one where we put the pitch accent. And what I mean by that is it's going to be a little higher pitch and then it's going to go down. In this case, it's the beginning of the word. So we have 3, 2, 1. And listen to the way that I say this, okay? Nanito. Nanito. I don't say nanito or nanito. Okay? That's what I mean by pitch accent. Nanito. Nanito. Can you hear that? There's like a raise in pitch in my voice on that particular one. We'll do some words that have it in the middle of the word so you can pay attention for it, so you can listen for it. Because this is one of the like main things that if you've ever heard like, oh, you sound kind of English or something, or if you just ever heard that you don't sound quite right, but the person hasn't been able to really describe why, this could be it. If you get the sounds of the letters even like wrong a little bit, but the pitch accent is right, you have such a better chance of being understood, in my opinion. Because the pitch accent is something that we get. It's subtle, and we kind of, I don't even know if it's in the books or it's taught or whatever, but it's important. So okay, stay with me. Nanto. So, and if we listen to this, the way that I pronounce that word, okay, I'm not even saying that I in the middle, right? I'm sort of pronouncing it like this. You'll even see people write the language this way sometimes. They'll drop that in there. They'll put an apostrophe or something as a bit of a mark to sort of help give you a hint that there's still something there, but it's missing, I guess. But then you can't go find it in the dictionary, or maybe you could, but like most of the time you can't. But if this was actually 2 syllables, the reason we know there's an I in there, okay, because if this was actually 2 syllables, and we can go up to wapos, okay, if there are only 2 syllables in a word, so let's break this up again. Wrong color, bear with me. Wapos, again, take the final off. We'll mark them. Oh, sorry. 1, 2. If there are only 2 syllables, once we remove the final, then the stress, the pitch accent will be on the last one. So we don't say wapos, we say wapos, wapos. Okay, so this particular example, wapos, 2, 1. Almost always, or at least in everyone I've ever heard speaking, this is how. And so when we look at this word, we say nanto. That's the way I hear that. Nanto. Ah, muy nanto. Nanto. I'm not saying nanto like I'd say wapos. I say nanto. Well, if it's not on the last one, it's actually on this one. That tells me there's got to be a syllable in the middle there, right there, right? That's why that I is there, because the pitch accent is right here. Nanto, nanto, nanto. You don't need to know all that. It can be helpful if you ever end up transcribing, but what's most important is if you hear a fluent speaker to try and pronounce it the way that they pronounce it. That's what's most important. Okay. And I think I'm starting to form. I don't like being super opinionated about things because I'm always wrong. But one of the things that I think about a lot is if we're hearing the language a lot, and then as we're hearing, we are practicing our pronunciation a lot, whatever that looks like, then these words will your brain is designed for language, eh? It's like one of its primary functions is communication. And so if we're hearing it a lot, then you'll start hearing the sounds, you'll start hearing the stress. You'll get to a place with words where you're like, I don't know why you say it that way. That's just the way you say it. That means you're not trying to memorize this stuff anymore. That means that you've internalized it. You've internalized the word. If you're at the point where you're like, I don't know why we say it this way, this is just the way you say it, that means that you've internalized that word, right? So this stuff can help as we go along, as we're working through things, as we're trying to remember words. But I would recommend, and that's the position I'm coming to, is that as much as we're reading and studying, reading and studying and breaking things down and learning about the language and the parts and the pieces and all of that, as much as we're doing that, we should also be listening to the language that much. Or if we do listen to the language as much as we're studying and breaking things down and all of that, then it will help inform us as to when the so-called rules don't really apply or how our community or region might be slightly different than others, right? Listening really is the way to go. It really, really is. Like when our elders say, they talk about, well, we didn't spell it when I was young, or we just listened, we were told stories, right? Or we just need immersion. Like all of those things are true, but it's up to us to be immersing ourselves. It's up to us to be listening a lot, a lot, a lot. That's critical. Okay, we're gonna do another short one, and then we'll go find a word where that where that pitch accent is in the middle somewhere. So let's break these. We can break these ones up really quick. Okay, so we take this pen drives me nuts. We take the final off the end, and then we could do vowel consonant pairs. So then we ignore that one and we go 1, 2, 3. So this is the one where the pitch accent is going to be oyagan, oyagan, oyagan. There's a little bit of a raised pitch on that one. Same as this one here. Drop the final, ignore that. 1, 2, 3. We go based on vowel consonant pairs, or in this case it was started with a consonant vowel pairs. Yi go one. It's not yi go one or yi go one. It's yi go one. Yi go one. This one only has 2. There's no final because it ends in a vowel. So then it's going to be niya. There's a little raise in pitch on that one. Niya. Niya. Got a couple questions. Oh, Peter says, I'm Cree teacher for my community. I can speak, read, and write. Miyasin. Tagake. Ian, when did you start learning? Neoptono gagi tato peponian. Gagi matsi nihiyuyan. I was 40, so it was about 7 years ago. About 7 years. Let's go find a longer word. Couple comments in from my... Okay, the stream on Twitch is doing okay too. And if you have, by the way, if you have questions or you have whatever, just drop them in the chat. I'm not going to go through all of these. We definitely could. Tapskutsaya, nipi, nipi, nipi. Remember that IY will, the Y's and the W's will elongate the sound of the weak vowels before them. Peter says James Bay Cree. Yeah, this is Nehiwiwan Plains Cree, as may be heard in the Treaty 6 area. Yeah. Some, some, some. Ah, that's a long A. Ah, some. And because this is two, again, we drop that final. This is our first one. This is our second one. So the stress is going to be on the end. Some. I call it stress. It's actually pitch accent. I was corrected. Some. Same as this one. Some. But that short A is going to be abrupt. Some. Oh, I got my disco. Had to do my puzzle. Just kind of comes up randomly in TikTok. It's strange. Suddenly it's like, we don't think you're there. Yeah. Again, that the W here is going to lengthen that O sound a little bit. Gisisu. Gisisu. So we get rid of that. Su. Se. Ge. So it's going to be here on the first one. Gisu. And sometimes I call that a long S. Sometimes when you see that SIS together, like SIS cluster, it'll just sound like S. It'll just be like, I call it a long S because you'll hear it that way sometimes, eh? Gisu, gisu. But you can hear the pitch accents still on this one. So you know there's like a beat in there. You know that there's a vowel in there still. Gisu, gisu. There's that long S again. That's going to be lengthened, but our pitch accent is still on the first one because there's 1, 2, 3. Gisu. Danua. This is a good example of that W, which is more like an O sound. You don't really hear that. You're only hearing the sound of the W in this when you pronounce that. Danua. Danua. Danue. Uma. Uta. Bakan. Bahkan. That's an interesting word. Bahkan. Muniao. Again, 1, 2, 3. Muniao. Muniao. It kind of starts out higher pitch and goes lower. Suniao. Same as this one. Suniao. Puna. Puna. Guna. Yeah. Let's find some more. I want to talk about stress a little bit more. I'm going to skip ahead. By the way, if you're just joining in, we're looking at this book, Cree Language of the Plains. We're mostly talking about sounds of the language. You can find this. Disco, I'll pull up that. If you go to I'm just going to pull it up so you can take a screenshot here if you want. This is my site here, kiano.net. You don't have to, you can just Google for this Cree Language of the Plains, but if you go to this site, kiano.net, I have a whole, what I call a learner library full of resources there. And if you go to the learner library, and then right at the top there, you can search for Cree Language of the Plains, and it'll take you right to here's the book here, Language of the Plains, the actual book, the workbook right below it. Sorry, the free versions. This is the main book here. I can't highlight that for some reason. The audio sessions that go with the workbook, and that's Gino Kemasis reading through the workbook. So if you're brand new to the language, or you're still pretty early on, or if you just haven't worked through it, I would recommend working through that because it's a fantastic resource and it's free. A summon, a summon now. A summon, a summon. What does that mean, Leslie? Leslie says, a summon, where is the pitch? Tisqua, we'll do that right here. Find a blank spot. A sum is to feed someone. A summon. I don't recognize the word, but assuming I did, I would say, Tisqua. Summon. If we break that up like this, again, we get rid of the My pen's being a pain. So get rid of the final, and then we go in consonant vowel pairs, and then we're looking for the third last one. There's a fancy word for it you don't need to know, but this is going to be 1, 2, 3. So this one here is the one that we're interested in. Yeah, where the pitch is going to be at right there. A samino. A samino. Oh, you're talking about a saimina. Is that what you're saying? This one's interesting because this is a particle phrase. Let's do that one. That's great. That's actually 2 words. Oh, let me get the right colors here. We didn't talk about this one yet. Again, that Y is going to lengthen the sound of that A a little bit. Oh, I'm on the wrong. Sorry. Sorry about that. Forgot to switch back. Yeah, this was the other one, assuming this was the word. Na, me, sa. Sa, me, no. But I think you mean saimina. Saimina. I think that's what you mean. That's actually 2 words. And it looks like, but because they're, I call this a particle phrase. I don't know if that's the right word. But on both of these, the stress, if you break it down, or the pitch accent, is going to be on the last of both of them. Actually, I did that last one wrong. It's actually here, because that's a final. Okay. And so it's going to be a 1, 2, 1, 2. It's actually going to be on the final on both of them. This one here. Saimina. Saimina. But when you put them together, what actually happens is they sort of become one word. And this is super common in the language, where they sort of become one word. And so you end up with the stress just in this spot here. Saimina. Saimina. Let me get rid of that. There. Saimina. Yeah. So it's sort of like this becomes the third spot here. Saimina. So it's going to be like this. Saimina. Sorry. Saimina. That's the way I would say that, or the way I hear it. But it is 2 words. Yeah, but it's a particle phrase. This happens often because you hear that from fluent speakers all the time, where they say, fluent speaker will say, the language flows together. The language flows, hey? And that's because these words come together. So somebody asks on TikTok, what does it mean? Sai, which is kind of like already, and mina is like also. But when you say them together, sai mina, it's sort of like once again, is the way I understand it. But we can go look it up. Asameno. Asameno. I got to think about that word. Sai. Again, already. Already, that's the way I understand that. Mina, which is like also, again, additionally. But you put them together, and there's these particle phrases in the language. They still kind of mean what they mean, but together it sort of creates like a new meaning or additional meaning to it. Saimina. Once again, all over again, as usual. That's kind of the way I understand it. Saimina. And I hear that in greetings sometimes, but also in stories. Or I use that a lot. I heard that from somebody. It might have been Wayne Jackson or somebody. Saimina kakyo kitam skat now. It's like once again, I greet you all. Yeah. Yeah. Asamin is feed me. Asamino doesn't make sense to me. Asamino. Asaminawa. Asamin, it's 2 words. Asamik would be feed us, I think. Or y'all feed. No, that's y'all feed them. Us. Asamanan would be the command, feed us. I was telling that to one person. Asamanan, feed us. If I was telling all of y'all to feed us, I'd say asamanan. No, it'd be the same. Asamanan. That would work for others. I'm saying, do you feed us or y'all feed us? I think that's the same for both. Yeah. Brenda says, saimina is like when you're repeating something, or yeah, repeating something. Saimina, like it happened again, I guess. Yeah, once again, that's how I understand that. Which is interesting, but asai on its own can be used in multiple contexts, and it can mean like already. It kind of means already, I guess, asai. But then you can say asaiti, like are we ready, or like ready, like asaiti, like ready. And then mina just is kind of like also. But another interesting one, I like now that we're onto these particle phrases, another interesting one is that you hear a lot. Magamina, right? Which is another interesting particle phrase. Because maga, when you hear that maga, that's like, it's like an interjection, right? It kind of means like but it doesn't always mean but, like it has its own kind of meaning, I guess you'd say. But again, we just talked about mina. Mina is like also. Let's look up maga and see if there's other ways. Maga kind of means but, still. Yeah, by contrast, maga. Like you can use it in different ways to sort of like as an interjection almost. And then mina, which is like also, we just looked it up. Again, furthermore. But when you say magamina, that's kind of like as usual. Like if somebody does something that's like very typical of their character, you'd say magamina, like kind of like they did it again, like nobody's surprised that it happened. Magamina, right? So it takes these, so maga and mina on their own, they kind of mean like a little bit different thing, but you put them together and it's like it creates its own meaning, which is fun, but it's also interesting. It makes particles really challenging, like some of them challenging to learn. And again, listening. D. Colum says, how do you say land back? I'm sure there's a way to say that, but I don't know what it is. Yeah. Because it's like an idiom, and it's like an idiom in English, hey? And idioms don't always translate the same way, because it's like you would have to say that as a command, I would think. Or like as a concept, I guess, but then I don't know if it would hold the same meaning. And I've seen posts on Facebook I've seen that post on Facebook for people saying that, but it's, again, you're kind of making stuff up in the language that it's like, it doesn't have the same recognizability maybe in the language, because you're kind of forcing an idiom into Nehiuwin. So not to say that you couldn't say it, but I definitely check, like go and search in one of those Facebook sites. You probably find it. Kevin says, when I saw you doing a live, I said to myself, magamina. Yeah. But it's got like a more of a negative connotation to me. Like magamina. Magamina no tegete o isage, you know what I mean? Like it's, yeah. Too funny. We're coming up on the solstice too here, so I should do that too. I don't know what the dates are, but on the solstice we'll do some reading too. We'll pull out some stories and we'll do some reading. I'm just announcing that now. That's the commitment's been made. Okay, let's do a little bit more. I was going to go find some examples of pitch accent in a little bit bigger words. So here's a good one here. Here's a couple of good ones, okay? So if we take these little bit bigger words and we'll break them down, again, we'll start with this one. So we'll take the final off because we're not worried about that. And then we start breaking these up based on, we'll break that one there. And then if we mark them out, 1, 2, 3. The third one is the one that we want. So if we look at it that way, and actually I'll mark this up differently so we can still read it nicely. We'll do it this way. We'll break it here, here, and there, and then I'll mark them 1, 2, 3, and this is the one we want. So the way I would say this is tehtapuin. Okay? Tehtapuin. Tehtapuin. Ayya. For that, uyagan. 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 That's the way I would say that. The pitch accent would be at the beginning. Uyagan. Or wiyagan. That's another way I hear that. Tehtapuin. Tehtapuin. And actually, we'll do another a really good example. I just forgot that I used to use that. We'll do this one here too. Again, get rid of the final. There's we'll put it there, there, and then we're gonna go 1, 2, 3. So the stress is gonna be, the pitch accent is gonna be here. Mitsuinatik, mitsisu, jesqua. Mitsisuinatik. There's a little raise in pitch there. Mitsuinatik. Yeah. Mitsuinatik. D. Coulomb says, how about rise up? Oh, the 21st is the solstice. Cool. So yeah, we'll on the 21st. I was trying to think if we're going to be. We might be in Edmonton, but we'll do stories anyway. I'll bring some stories with me. Yeah, if we're in Edmonton, we'll still read we'll read for probably 4 nights. Mitsuinatik, right? Let's find an example though. Actually, well, I'll do one more just to show super clearly how this works. We'll actually go to my other page here. I think there's a way. Oh, I won't worry about it. It's fine. My writing is so messy though. That's all I'm kind of worried about. We'll do it this way. So we're gonna use a word. Kevin, I'll come right back to your question. The question is where is the sonic? The sonic? There are 2 consonant vowel pairs. You emphasize the second from the left. What do you mean by sonic? I don't understand what that means. Okay, I'll run through these examples because here's a good set of examples. That's too thin. I need a thicker pencil. Chisqua. So we're going to start with this word, nihio. Okay. Then, if we look at this one, I will let you work it out. Remove the final. Ya, he, ne. So we'll just mark that one. The pitch accent's going to be on that one, okay? Now, because that's 1, 2, 3, now we will add a syllable onto the end, okay? So now we've added that onto the end. If we remove the final, we have a consonant vowel, consonant vowel, consonant vowel. The third last one is here. Whoops, I want that in red. Uma. So this is the thing that tripped me up when I was a learner, figuring this out. The pitch accent on this word has changed, and this is how words that you thought you knew, when you hear them, you can just absolutely not recognize them at all. Is because that pitch accent or that stress will move. It'll move. It moves over when you add more syllables on the end. That's just the way it works. So this first word, I would pronounce nehio. Nehio. Okay? I'm putting the pitch accent on the third last. The second one, nehio. We've added a syllable on the end. Nehio. Okay? Because now it's 1, 2, 3. Let's keep going. I'm going to add another syllable on the end. Yeah. Get rid of the final. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now this is a word I'll say mispronounced if I can. I guess it's pronounced largely correctly, but the pitch accent is often off for learners. This is one of those because we know it's nehio. So then often from learners I'll hear nehio wewin. Nehio wewin. That's the way I hear people say this. Nehio wewin. We say nehio, so ne must be the pitch accent. Nehio wewin. But it's nehio wewin. Nehio wewin. Because that pitch accent is there. It moves over because there's another syllable. Let's keep going. We can go further. My writing is so bad. See that? Don't look at how messy my writing is. I'm really trying. Okay, so we're going to get rid of the final. That's those two. And we've got 1, 2, 3. So see how it moved over again? Oh, forgot my... See how it moved over again? Nehio wewani. Nehio wewani. Horses 1998 says, hello, are you able to teach with syllabics? Thank you. I could, but we'd all have to smudge. That's the way I was taught. Pamoisi nagskumotaha tahatsik ugi kwaeska tota make to pogoga pigitingin egwa pogoga pogoga gagisimo. That's what I was told. Before you introduce the syllabics, you need to smudge, and there needs to be a prayer. And maybe we can plan that for one night. I've never done it kind of online, but Ruben Quinn's got some good videos. If you search for Ruben Quinn Cree syllabics, you'll find the 2 videos. I think they're from, is it Edmonton Public Library or something? He's wearing a yellow shirt, I'm pretty sure. Yellow or red, pink, I don't remember. But they're both an hour each. There's 2 of them, and he goes through the whole, that's the way he taught us. And he goes into great detail. Yeah. Yeah. And so, but when you use the syllabics, then you get the same thing, right? Like, ne is this way. Yeah, there's an aspiration there. Yeah. Right? You have 1, 2, 3. Your pitch accent is on this one. Ne, he, yo. Ne, yo. Right? See if I can fumble through the rest of these. I do not practice syllabics enough. Ne, he, will. So same thing happens here. That's going to be here. Then this one. Remove the final. 1, 2, 3. That's why I call those finals, eh? That's what that is. This W here and the syllabics, that's that one, right? And this one here, that W there, that's that one. That's the final. So then this one, 1, 2, 3, it's going to be this one here. Nihio. Nihio. That one speaks the language. Oh yeah, if you're on Facebook, Bill just shared a link to the Rubens video. Thanks for that, Bill. What if a word has 7 or 8? You still use the third last one. If it's 7 or 8, like this one has, how many's here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The stress is still, the pitch accent's still on the third last. Now there might be some in the middle, right? And that's why when they write SRO, they put a hyphen in between those chunks sometimes, and that will often separate the pitch accent between pieces of the word. Again, it can, there's regional variations too. So this is only guidelines. It's not like absolute. It's not an absolute thing, right? This is just sort of, so this one, nehi, yo, we, win. Oh, not that one. It's a little kind of backwards C looking thing. So we have 1, 2, 3. Pitch accent goes there. Nehi yo we win. Right? So it's the same for syllabics. Might as well do the last one since we're here. Show everybody how bad my writing is. Guess that ship has sailed. Nehi yo. Oh, wrong way. By the way, if you want to get good at syllabics, just take an SRO book and just start writing them out. Just transliterate it into syllabics. Ne, yo, we, and then ni is going to be this way. Ni, we, ni. So remove the final 1, 2, 3. That's where your stress is. Your pitch accent. I got to stop calling this. Ne, we, ni. Right? So it's exactly the same whether you're using SRO or syllabics. They're the same thing. If that's helpful. Can we find a really long word? Let me think of a really long word. Think of a word with 7, that word with, from that, what I was told. Na, disqua. Nagiskamota hatsik. So then we remove the final. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7. But again, it's going to be the third. So 1, 2. That's where the pitch accent is. Ta. Inagskamota hatsik. Inagskamota hatsik. And if there's multiple pitch accents, it's probably because it's a different word or a different preverb or something, a couple of words put together into a longer word. But again, the language flows. So it's one of those things you have to just listen lots. See? That will inform the best, especially if you're listening to elders or speakers from your community. That will inform you the best as to how to pronounce something from your community, right? How to say it properly. Listen lots and then understand that the sounds of the language are not English sounds. Like we had a comment come in earlier about, this is how I would spell this using phonetics. And the reason I don't use phonetic sounds is those phonetic sounds are English sounds. That's an approximation. We're trying to approximate the sounds of Nehiyuwin with English sounds. But if we use Nehiyu letters, if we use SRO, okay, where is it at? I got a slide here, there. The sounds of English, the English alphabet sounds can only approximate the sounds of Nehiyawiwin. If we want to write using the correct sounds, then we need to use a Nehiyaw alphabet. And I think people make that assumption sometimes that when they see these sounds, when they see these letters, they think, "Oh, I don't want to use those because they're too English, they're too colonized or something like that." But these were developed, this writing system was chosen by our elders in the 70s. There's a piece of a transcript from a meeting at the University of Alberta. I have it, I'd have to dig it up, but I have a copy of it where the lady, the elder leading the meeting, she stood up and she spoke in Cree, and she said to the group, "I want you to know that it is us, the Cree people, that are choosing this system, and we've only invited these white people here to to help us, figure out some of the details, basically, right?" But this was developed by our elders because they recognized back then the need for a consistent. I don't like the standardized is kind of a consistent writing system. When you write things consistently, then that's really helpful, right? And again, I'm jumping around my thing. If you look at this, I'll give everybody a second. Some people have already seen this before, right? But if you look at this for a minute, just try and read what this sentence says. If you stare at it for a minute, you can puzzle out most of what it says, right? This sentence says, this sentence is not that hard to read. That's because we don't read based on the sounds of the letters. We read based on the shapes of the words. That's why you can look at this and read this. If the shapes were off, then we would all of a sudden have trouble. But the thing is, by the time we learn to read English, right, we're already largely fluent in the English language, and we were just associating those words with words we already knew. So how do we recreate that process with Nehiyawiwin? It's okay to use the spelling to help remind us what a word is, but we do need to know how the word sounds, right? That can help a lot. If we've listened a lot, we've heard the language a lot, then that will help inform us a lot. Okay, let's do some more, let's look for some more tricky words. We'll go through a couple of these. CP, that IY is going to make an E sound. CP, okay. That W on the end, again, that's got its own sound. That's why this is going to sound like AO. So if we go back, 1, 2, 3, ginoseo, ginoseo, ginoseo. Again, that IY makes an E sound. BACs, BACs. And that sound, like shook, astotin, astotin, astotin. There's only 2 here. Get rid of the final. We got 1, 2, agop, agop. 1, 2, 3, mitsuin, mitsuin. Get rid of the final. 1, 2, 3. Uspoagan. Uspoagan. There's only 2 here. And T. Tim. Tim. Let's find some tricky ones. We did those 2. This one we talked about on Sunday. In some regions, because, again, that W has its own sound, eh? It's a rounding of the lips. So in some areas for this word, I don't hear isqueo, I just hear sco. Just like the W's have taken over, you don't even hear that long E in there. Kevin says, that what you just said is a clear example of why learning the spirit markers is vital, because we read according to the shapes. And it can be done with SRO. Like I It can be done with SRO, but I won't tell you that's the right way to do it, right? You can do it any way that the best way, whatever way works for you is the right way. The way that gives you more language and helps you read, that's the right way. If you're just tuning in, we're looking at Cree Language of the Plains. You can find these free online. There's a PDF of the workbook and the reference, and also the audio sessions are available for free online if you're just checking this out now. Brenda says that's the challenge when teaching young learners that Roman orthography is used in a lot of languages, not consistency in the symbols. Yeah. Yeah, so it's definitely confusing. And I think I've never taught kids, so my opinion doesn't really matter here. But I think I've heard people say, like try not to focus on the writing in the beginning until they have a grasp of the sounds. Or with Itzhak Beganak, I've seen groups where they get the sounds a lot quicker because, again, you're right, they're associating the sounds of the language with those symbols as instead of being, potentially confused about, oh, is this, am I looking at a Nehiu A or am I looking at an English A? Like that would definitely be confusing, I think. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I'm looking for more. We might actually jump into a story or a piece of something that has more. Actually, I'm going to do that right now. I think that's what I'll do. We'll jump over to this and we'll find some words in here that have more challenging clusters. So let me bump this up a bit and then let me see if I can take a screenshot of this. And then I'll send it over to my iPad. Oh, I've got to do it this way. That's right. Just taking a screenshot that I can send, start capture. I don't need a ton, but maybe that much. Okay. And then see if I can share this. Let's do it this way. So I've captured this screenshot and I'm going to share it. Oh, I need to do that, do I? I forgot about that. Okay. Well, let's try this another way. See if I can pull it up in my iPad. Just bear with me. I'm going to pull up that bloomfield.keanu.net and we'll grab this one here. And if I can remember how to take a screenshot on this thing. Just like that. Send it to... wonder if I can copy and... No, I don't want to do that. Bear with me. I'll figure this out in a minute. Save in files. On my iPad. That sounds good. Save. I don't use my iPad enough to know what the heck I'm doing here, so... Be nice if you could draw in the browser just the same way. I use a program called GoodNotes, which I really enjoy. And then I think I can go add a page, an image, and I can grab that. Here we go. Yeah, there we go. Now I can draw on it. So let's take some of these. This is from bloomfield.keanu.net. I'm looking at that story. I think it's Tihtigwayu. If you're interested in going and grabbing it for yourself. This one here, the Sundance Tihtigwayu. Yeah, that's the one. All right. So, and one of the things that we plan to do is actually put these in syllabics. But again, if you can get to the point where you can see the letters not as English letters but as Nehiu letters, then you can read this. Even though there's lots of words on this, I don't know. I can confidently read the bulk of this. So we'll just give it a once through, and then we'll break some of these down and find some of those clusters where they're interesting. Gaias nistam eitagok umaski kiseinuak witamagwak kisemantua. Ayame gamek kiwimit nawao ka opegi hitoyik. There's probably two ways. We'll come back to this one because this collapses sometimes. Ogi sigwa tanatotamoaik kinwes kitapimatsiik. There's another good example. We'll talk about that word. Kitawasimisuawak. I struggle with these words. Kita opegi haekok. Ego mamo isogias dianotaski. Mamo stigeogamek. Ayame heogamek nipagwe simugamek. Ego gemiet nawao kitapmatsiek itegwak simantua. So there's lots of words in there I've never heard before. I am guessing at the spelling or the pronunciation in most cases, but once you hear patterns in the language, right? For instance, I want to come back to this word. This HIT right here. Even though if we look at that in the same way that we broke that down before, right? And we'd like take off the final and we count 1, 2, 3. Then in theory, our stress should be right there, right? But there's this thing that happens often when we have IHI clusters or IHIT. This will just sound like eat. And so that pitch accent will jump back 1. It's still technically the third last in the way we're pronouncing it, but it's not necessarily always the third last in the way that we spell it, if that makes sense. So the way I would probably want to pronounce this, gao opegi hitoyik. But the way I'll probably hear this is gao pegitoyik. Gitoyik. This will kind of smush together into like a long I sound. But it's still important that we spell it this way. For one, that ito is in there. Ito, which means each other. That they call that the reciprocal. Gao pegitoyik. Yeah, so that's one. But that's not to say that if you heard ga o pegi hitoyik, that would also be correct. Here's another example of a word where, again, 1, 2, 3. So that pitch accent, in theory, should be on that wi. But it's almost like it's not really a rule. It's more just like, again, like guidelines, if you want to think of it that way, right? Where if there's a strong vowel beside the weak vowel that is in the stress position or the pitch accent position, often that will get smushed and the speaker will defer to the stronger vowel for the pitch accent on that. So in some areas you will hear ayameheo wigamik. Ayameheo wigamik. Ayameheo wigamik. But I will probably hear this as ayameheogamik. So that raise in pitch will probably be there. Ayameheogamik. Here's another good example here. Again, we remove that final. We go 1, 2, 3. That should be here. That te. And it would be correct. Again, in some areas we'll hear that, right? Gita bima tisiek. You will hear that in some regions. Gita bima tisiek. But because it's that what I call a weak vowel, in that stress position or that pitch accent position, speakers will defer to that stronger vowel next to it for the stress. So what I hear more often is getapimatsiek, getapimatsiek. So if you kind of condense this into one, right, then it's still technically, if you smush these into one and ignore that I, then it's still technically the third. 1, 2, 3. Getapimatsiek. But again, totally regional. What's some more stuff in here that can be... They didn't do what I'd normally hear in there. One of the things... Ogisigoa nitotamuaek, or natotamo or nitotamo, but sometimes when you have this NIT at the beginning of a word, I won't hear nitotamo, I'll hear intotamo. Or even sometimes in the case of this speaker I'm working with right now, we'll typically reduplicate this, in which you might want to say tananetotamoyek, but what this will actually end up sounding like is tanantotamoyek, tanantotamoyek. It's like that weak I right there disappears. Tanantotamoyek is how I would probably hear that. What are we doing for time here? Where's the clock? Oh, it's 10 to 8. How did that happen? So I'm going to open it up for questions. I wanted to just go over sounds of the language tonight, and it's amazing how 2 hours has flown by. I guess we have, according to my TikTok counter, I have 17 minutes left. So we'll go a little bit more, but if there's any questions, feel free to drop them in there so we can get to your questions before the end of the chat, before the end of the live. I see somebody is messaging me like crazy, so I'm just trying to clear some of those out. Okay, that seems fine. Yeah, so don't be shy. Drop your questions in there. Otherwise, we'll just keep going for another 10 minutes here before we wind things down. Again, that Y makes an E sound. Mi tinawao. Mi tinawao. That H. Sometimes depending on the word, especially when there's that OHK at the end of a word, I won't always hear the K. So in some regions you might hear eitago, and you just hear that little puff of air at the end. Eitago. But in some cases I will hear eitago. It really depends on the speaker, and really depends on the region lots of times. Here's another example of that. I consider the W to be more like a strong vowel. It makes an O sound. It's literally the rounding of the lips. And so this here, ksenu, nu, that's the way I'll hear that. Ksenu, ksenuak. That's another good example. A weak vowel in that stress position, and so speakers will put preference on the stronger vowel next to it. I don't think I hear kiseyinuak, which would technically be, if you were to say that there were rules, wa, get rid of the final, 1, 2, and this would technically be the pitch accent position, but I don't know if I've ever heard that kiseyinuak. I think I've almost always only heard kisenuak. It's like this blends into one vowel, one syllable almost. Kisenuak. Yeah. What else is in here that can be challenging? Here's another one that disappears a little bit. It's a big word. But how many's in there? What were we looking for before, Kevin? 8? 8 pairs? So this might do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8. This is going to do that again because if there was a locative on the end, right, then this is what I talk about patterns. Whenever you see this, gamik is a building, and if we put that OHK on the end, then that's the locative. That means at or in the building. And the way you hear this is gamgok, right? You don't hear that I usually, but I will, gamekok. I have heard that, right? Same as this, wigamik. I don't always hear that wigamik on the end of like. So this would be mawe mostige wigamik, mawe mostige wigamik. Mawe mostige wigamik. But the way I'll probably hear this, again, because that I is in that weak vowel is in that position, I usually hear the speaker defer to that stronger vowel next to it. Mamostigeo gamik. Mamostigeo. That's how I hear that. Mamostigeo gamik. It's like that disappears, and we just end up with this and a little, I don't know what you call that. A gap, I guess. I don't know. Mawemostigeo gamik. Yeah. Same here. Nipagwe simugamik. But I have heard that Nipagwe simuigamik. It really depends on the region. Kapmatsik etegwak simantua. All right, we got 2 minutes, a few minutes to go a little further into this one. Yeah. Eskoa ski gita itagok, gita itagok. Here we go. Tamamos tagagik. Mauemos tagagik. That Y in there, you kind of almost don't hear it. It's just there's like a long geek. Mamos tagagik. In some words, depending on what the ending is, what that final letter is, I won't hear a ya sound there. I'll hear a wa. I hear this a lot with West, but also Southern Alberta in some particular words. Like I don't hear inanaskamoyan. I hear inanaskamoan. It's just the way it's just a variation, right? Go ahead, Kevin. We're here for questions. This sounds more Eastern to me, Gigwe. I would hear Miogigwe. You see how those blended together? It's like the pitch accent is almost there. Miogigwe. Sort of becomes one word, even though it's 2 words. Miogigwe. I have a question. Why don't we go till 10 o'clock? Well, because I usually get hungry by this time. But somebody upstairs has been cooking for like an hour. My iPad clock says it's 9:41 a.m. I was super confused there for a minute. Yeah, it's 8 o'clock, so it's 9 o'clock in Edmonton. Is it 9 o'clock in Saskatchewan? But somebody upstairs is cooking. I've been smelling it for 45 minutes, so my belly's just growling. So by the time we get to the 8 o'clock bell, I'm just like, okay, let me out. I need out of here. I need to go eat. Yeah. See if we can find one more. Here's another one. But the stress is where you think it is right here. Get rid of the final. 1, 2. This one. But this I is the one. Pagatin tinawaw. Get this pagtin tinawaw. Pagatin tinawaw. It's still kind of there. You just don't hear it really. Or I won't hear it. I'll just finish reading this off, I guess. Elgo tamamo stagagi ek, miogigwe tanitotamek. Hexigitisse pagetin tinawao. Hikayo ikats punitag. Iskogita itagokuma aski. Miugigwe kawita matagok. Namawiaki gwe maya tak. Wita matnawao. Egokin ways. Matsu. Pimatisuin. What? What does that mean? Pimatsuinuik. Oh, Matsuinuik. That makes sense. Kawita matagok. Eteguakisimantua. So if you, but again, yeah, I guess just thinking about it now, the reason I have confidence, even though when I listen to myself, I think I'm like, man, I really need to work on my pronunciation. Maga, yeah, yeah. Wita mago in manaya, mea sine nita ni yui, and I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. When I listen to myself, I'm like, man, I don't like the way I sound when I speak the language on a recording or something like that. But I can speak with confidence in some cases, and that's a combination of listening a lot and then associating those words with what's being written, I guess. I don't really have a clear process for that, but I do know that listening is a major part of it. Listening a lot. I know that transcribing helps. By the way, we're going to be transcribing on Sunday. I'm going to sit back. I've been leaned over my computer for 2 hours. Kevin says, just grab some Pollard's crackers and some butter. Wouldn't be the first time. No, Miasin, we do this every Sunday. We're going to be back on Sunday night, 27th. Let me check my calendar, Tisquak, because when is the solstice here? Somebody said 21st. That's only 4 days away. Is that going to be Sunday? I'm really bad with math when it comes to days of the week. Oh, it is. Sunday is the 21st. So maybe this Sunday what we'll do is, and instead of transcribing this week, maybe what we'll do is we'll read stories. Well, I think BG was trying to tip me off, but I wasn't cluing in. I wasn't picking up what you were laying down. So Sunday's going to be the solstice. So what we'll do is I'll dig out my my book. Well, I already have them out. They're upstairs. But we'll dig out some Wisagaitzak stories, and we'll tell some stories. We'll do that for 4 nights. You know what? If Solomon Rat's telling stories this year, I don't want to take people away from. I did it the last year and I did the year before, but I didn't see anybody else doing it. So I was like, you know what? We're just going to do this on. We'll just do it. We'll just go live and read stories. So we'll keep an eye out. If somebody else is reading stories on this or telling stories on the solstice, then I'll defer to them. Because I'll be reading. I won't actually be, telling the story from memory. Though that's my goal. When my little one, if one of my kids could summarize and tell me about the story in the language, man, talk about life goals. Leslie, thanks for stopping by. We're going to wrap up in about 3 minutes. If there's any last questions as we wind down, we'll be back on Sunday, probably for a story. I usually transcribe on Sundays, but we'll do stories if nobody else is doing stories this year. I'll message Arden and see if she's heard if Solomon or somebody's going to do something. Or if you heard somebody's going to do something, let me know, because we will tune in and listen. That's one of those things whenever I hear we hear, the old people say, I used to hear these stories when I was a kid, or even younger, some people, parents or people I talk to sometimes I used to hear these stories when I was a kid. And I'm like, let's make sure that our kids are saying that too, right? Oh, my my dad or my mushum told me those stories or something, right? Let's keep that going. Same with Gilgatuin, right? I've been trying to this week fire up Mananto Bear Kimaga. Start just phoning people. I was thinking about Sainapan the other day, and then out of the blue she phoned me, and I was like, "That's awesome." But I want to start just phoning and visiting, even for 5 or 10 minutes, like every day, every other day, just another somebody else I know that speaks the language, just to pick up new words. Or like when I was on the phone with Sainapan, I was like, she would say something, and I'd be like, "Oh, what's that mean?" Can you go ahead, and I'd repeat the word or whatever, and then she would talk about it, and then sometimes she would repeat herself in English, throw me a lifeline, right? So anyway, I kagisita no ego mit tanin no tegetan, pai no tegetan o mania. Ego mia sin anuts kakil gapi witi gapi gilko anuts atoskat ma koma tansis sita kwako makipiksko no. Ego mitni mia sini tagakita kwano tagakita guacoma ni hiu win. Ego gispin goyas ke en sapon stota mano maga tansi isita guac, the way it sounds. Goyas kapigskoyen. You'll produce those sounds correctly if you understand how they sound. So mitni mi asin asai mi nakakio kitam skat na wa kananaskum tinawao ay kakio gapi gyugui kanuts ay kitatami hinawao mina ay ego ay anut or ay was gonna say ay amehio gisiga ge ka ay mitsige ka ay mitsigano. Yeah, you'd say it that way. We'll probably start reading on Sunday unless we hear otherwise from someone else on the solstice. So everybody have a great night. I'm going to go get some food. Danse Hal. Good to see you. I should catch up with you one of these days. Thanks again, everybody, for stopping by. We're going to wrap it up there. And I hope you're enjoying the break if you've got a break for the holidays. And we'll catch you again on Sunday. Okay. Muestas.